Welcome to LiveDaf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf Hayomi, Horayos Daf Zayin. We begin on the very last line of Vav Beis, back to the Kohen Moshiach, the anointed Kohen, the Kohen Gadol, who's a leader of our nation and qualified to issue his own rulings, at least for the most part, when the Kahanim Gadolim were men of notable character and scholarly accomplishment. In any case, the Torah sets him apart. He says the Torah says that if the Kohen Mashiach sinned in a very severe way, of course unintentionally, and actually the Mishnah says it was preceded by a ruling, a psak, a verdict which he himself issued, on his own account. He could do that. He paskined that he's permitted to eat a certain type of fat, thinking it was okay. So this hayra'ah, this mistaken ruling, was followed by an act, by a transgression. In this case, just like when the tzibur, when the public errs in this manner, with this 1-2-step system, where the tzibur were misled by the Sanhedrin, who issued this ruling, which they carried out, the end result is the par. Right, results in the par being brought, the special korban, the cow. Likewise, the Kohen Mashiach has follows a similar pattern, a similar system, that if he errs in this manner, the mistaken ruling and then the actual implementation of that mistake, so it's sort of like an intellectual mistake followed by an actual mistake, then he too brings a par for his sin. How do we know that in fact the Kohen Mashiach needs to have this 1-2-step system to bring the korban, and otherwise he's exempt? How do we know? The Tanur Rabbanon, we have a brayz. The pasuk in describing the Kohen Mashiach sinning uses the lashon la'ashma sa'am. He sinned similar to when the public sins. That connects the two. Hooray! We learn from here, Mashiach, that the Kohen Mashiach as Ketzibur is like the general public. And just like there, it's a 1-2-step system, likewise over here. Why do we need this special, pasuk? Well, I didn't. We can simply derive it by way of making a parallel between the two. How? Look, tzibur, there are many similarities between the tzibur, the general public that errs based on the Bezdin's miscalculation, and the Kohen Mashiach. How? Tzibur mutzo mechlal yach. We find that the public has been separated, put on a different plane, on a different track than an ordinary citizen who sins. Rashi explains in terms of the korban, right? A regular person who sins, who does something which is an averik that can generate kares if done intentionally, in which case the flip side is a korban chatos if done unintentionally. What type of korban does it bring? We learned this many times, right? Kispa or seira, a she goat, a she sheep, right? One or the other. But the tzibur has its own track, its own obligation, a par. So we see that the tzibur is unique in this sense, and likewise a Kohen Mashiach is unique in his sense. So Mashiach mutza, he's been taken out from the general, system, Michlal Yachid, and separated from the ordinary person, in which that he brings a par instead of a regular korban. So let's compare the Mashiach to the Tzibur and assume they follow, a similar system. Ma Tzibur ein chayavin el al helem davar, just like by the Tzibur. The chiv only happens when there's helem davar, there's that intellectual miscalculation. Coupled with the actual act of Mashiach, likewise, the Kohen Mashiach requires both steps. Lo yehi, he would only bring his par if both components are there. El al helem davar. Firstly, there was this intellectual, misjudgment. Im shigas masa, with the actual act. Says the Gemara, you know why it's not really so clear? Because you choose to compare the Mashiach to the Tzibur. Perhaps take a different route. Compare the Mashiach to somebody else. A Nasi. A Nasi is a leader, is the ultimate leader, the king, who also has his own rules, his own type of korban. He brings a sa'ir, a he-goat. Nasi Musa Machlal Yachid, we find a Nasi. is different than a regular person in terms of the type of carbon. U'Mashiach mutzu mechal yochad, and Mashiach as well is separate, is different. Let's compare those two. Nasi, just like by the Nasi, maybe he brings his carbon by simply doing something wrong without that 1-2 step system. B'shigas masa. By doing this, transgression, below helam dava, without that intellectual, misjudgment that preceded it. Af Mashiach, perhaps the same would apply to Mashiach. All he needs is the act. Maybe he'll bring his power, b'shigas masa, just by doing the act, below without helam dava. Well, you know what? Let's see. Which one is a better comparison? We're trying to define, we're trying to clarify the system applied to the Mashiach. On one side we have the Tzibur, who require the Helam Davar as well. On the other side we have the Nasi, who doesn't require. Which way do we go? Let's see. Which is a fairer matchup. Look, Tzibur repar. Let's start with the Tzibur. They bring a par. There is no concept of Asham Tali by Tzibur. As we're going to see later. There's no if they have any suffix, whether they sin, there's no special carbon Asham Tali by a Tzibur. Likewise, a Mashiach has the same rules. Mashiach brings a par, bepar. Vein maybe doesn't bring Asham Tali. Okay, so you have two commonalities. Ma Tzibur einay chayav ela halam davar shigas mas. So just like by the Tzibur, the shigas masa has to be advanced by the helam davar. Mashiach, likewise, a Mashiach requires both components. Lo yechayiv, he can only bring his par, unless we have both al helam davar im shigas mas. Well, eklach al derech su. And perhaps you could take a turn to the Nasi now and say, look, Mashiach is comparable to the Nasi as well. Nasi maybe se'ira b'aviz kechavim. What happens if a Nasi, a king, sins with respect to idol worship? He brings a se'ira, a shigot, just like anybody else would do. So that's the Nasi's halacha. Or maybe Asham Vadai. Another point that the Nasi relates to is that Asham Vadai. Certain violations trigger a certain type of carbon called the Asham Vadai, and that's applicable by a Nasi. And Mashiach also has both these things. Mashiach maybe se'ira b'avayz kechavim. Mashiach sins by the Zara, he brings a se'ira. Maybe Asham Vadai, and likewise, he can theoretically bring an Asham Vadai. And these 2 points do not apply to a tzibur. So with respect to these two halachas, Mashiach compares better to the Nasi than to the tzibur. And therefore we'll say, Ma Nasi maybe b'shigas mas. So regarding other averis, just like the Nasi, will bring his sa'ir by simply doing something wrong without the intellectual misjudgment that preceded it. Af Mashiach maybe b'shigas mas. Likewise, perhaps the act alone is sufficient to trigger a par by the Mashiach. So basically, we have the tzibur on one side who require helam davar im shigas masa. We have the Nasi on the other side who only has shigas masa. We have the Mashiach in the middle, being tugged in both directions. So he's sort of in limbo. Talmud, that's why we need that pasuk. That explains why we needed it. Lashma sa'am, comparing the Mashiach to everybody else, to the public. Hari Mashiach tzibur, compare the Mashiach to the tzibur that require both components. Ma tzibur eina mevi ela helam davar mishigas masa. Just like that's required for the tzibur, likewise for the Mashiach. Af Mashiach eina mevi will only bring his par. Ela only if he has al helam davar with im shigas mas. Says the Gemara, okay, so you're comparing the Mashiach to the tzibur. Let's take it a step further and compare them all the way. Ema, let's say, mat tzibur, just like by the public who sinned, based on the the Bezdin's misjudgment. Right? When there was this ruling by the Bezdin, and the crowd follows and implements, the Bezdin is chayav. Perhaps the same concept can apply to a Mashiach, if others adopted his rulings. Av Mashiach, when he ruled to permit something, and others followed and implemented, his ruling, perhaps that obligates him as well, because he precipitated that transgression. Talmud no, comes the pasuk and says he has to look after himself. He doesn't have the same status as a bezdin who's responsible for the general public. He brings a chat to atone for his personal transgression, and we learn only al mashachata, on his sin, who maybe he brings his carbon, but not if others adopted and implemented his opinions. Maybe he doesn't bring a carbon on others' transgressions. Amar. Let's go back and review one more point in this brayso. So initially we're trying to connect the Mashiach to the tzibur by saying, well, there are two common denominators. Mashiach brings a par like the tzibur does. There's no Hashem Tali applicable to a Mashiach, just like by the tzibur. But we sort of cited it as accepted facts. How do we know these things are true? How do we know the second point, that he doesn't bring Hashem Tali? How do we know that's correct? Because we have a pasuk. This is by the Hashem Tali. So the Kohen is mechaper al shigigasa shagag, and these last words seem to be superfluous to teach us. Hashem Tali only applies to a person who typically brings a chatos simply as a result of an act. That is sufficient to trigger his chatos, as opposed to the public, who require another element of helam davar as well, and likewise a Mashiach, who requires the helam davar. But hold it, we haven't yet established that as a fact. We're still trying to discover and prove, in fact, if the Kohen Mashiach requires helam davar. And here we're sort of citing it at face value, and it's serving as the basis for eliminating the Hashem Tali by the Kohen Mashiach, because typically by a regular chatas he requires helam davar, which doesn't fit with the bill of this pasuk. Hashem Tali only applies to an individual person whose chatas, whose regular chatas, is typically triggered by simply the shgag of the act, as opposed to the public, who requires an additional helam davar. So they don't fit the bill. Likewise, Yatsa Mashiach as well will not fit the bill, because he too requires helam davar. She'en shigasa v'chdas shava. Because it's not the chet is not limited to the shgaga. Shgaga means the act. So it needs to be mishachat tosai. His mistake, his misjudgment, v'shigasai, relates only to the act itself, as opposed to Mashiach she'en shigasai v'chadasei shava. His shgaga and his chet are not shava, which means to say that the sin, the mistake, is not limited to the act itself. He requires that the act be preceded by a misjudgment in terms of psak, in terms of hayra. How do we know? Because the pasuk clearly correlates the Mashiach to the Am. And we learn, Harihu Mashiach Ketzibur. He has the same rules as the Tzibur, who require helam davar. So again, the starting point here is, the Tzibur requires two things, helam davar, shigas mas. From the pasuk la'ashmas Am we learn, the same formula that applies to the Tzibur applies to the Mashiach. He has both components. Right? Based on that, we know that he's preempted from an Hashem Tali, which is limited to a person who does not have two components. And now the obvious question is, this pasuk that correlates the Mashiach to the Tzibur, ad kan like amrle. We don't even, at this point, as of yet, at this point in the brayso, we're not yet aware of this correlation, this drasha that we can compare the Mashiach to the Tzibur. Recall, please, that was the whole point of the brayso. Starting point was Lashma Sa'am, to make that connection. Why do we need Lashma Sa'am? We have other ways to compare, to connect, to derive one from the other. And as we're sort of going step by step through the alternate route, we make a quick reference back to the first route, which we haven't taken, which we veered from. You're right, says the Gemara. Right? You're right, this point that we're making based on the Hashem Tali, not applying to the Kohen Mashiach because he doesn't fit the bill, because he requires two steps, it's just sort of Kedinaspa, was brought in sort of as an aside. It wasn't the main point, because really that point hasn't yet been proven. Rather, the main point was that just like the tzibur brings a par, the Mashiach brings a par, so that allows for the connection, and that took us to the next point where we brought in the nasi to sort of counter that, so on and so forth. But ultimately, we actually went back to Lash Masam. So bottom line is, Lash Masam teaches us that just like by the tzibur, by the am, both components are required to trigger the par. He'elam davar with shigas masa. Same with the Mashiach. Continues the Mishnah. Hayra b'fnei atzmai. So back to the Mashiach, who issued his own personal ruling on a certain isser that he allowed for himself. V'asa b'fnei atzmai, and he carried it out. Now b'fnei atzmai means that although at the same time there was, say a ruling issued by the Bezdin for the general public to allow a different type of forbidden, matter. You would think perhaps we lumped them together and they're both covered by the same par. No. He has his own track because he spoke about his own isser. He issued a ruling and actually implemented his own isser, a different isser than the tzibur. He gets his own obligation, his own carbon. He needs to bring his own par. However, suppose his psak correlated with a psak that the Bezdin issued at that time. They both permitted the same type of, forbidden fat, and he did it, at the same time with them, so to speak. So then he need not bring his own carbon. He's covered under the same umbrella. Continues the Mishnah, because really, the Mashiach is very similar. His system is patterned, is modeled after the Tzibur's system, as we just discussed. So in many ways, they're very similar, very closely related, in which case, if he did it together with them, so he was matter, the same thing that the Bezdin was matter, and he actually did it, he could be covered by the same carbon. She'ein Bezdin chayovin, because just like by the Bezdin, the chiv is only achiyoru levatal mitzvahs l'kayim mitzvahs, when they allowed a portion of a certain isser and maintained the rest, as we discussed the other day. V'chein Mashiach, the same exact model applies to the Mashiach. Likewise, if the Bezdin allowed certain aspects of Avodah Zarah, they're only chayiv achiyoru levatal mitzvahs l'kayim mitzvahs. Again, if they negated part and kept the rest. Says the woman, immediately, how do we know that in fact the Kohen Mashiach can sometimes be covered by the same carbon as the Bezdin as the Tzibur? We learned in the Bryce, if he ruled the same as the Tzibur, and did it together, perhaps he still needs to bring his own par. The answer is no. Vidunu, because we can learn, based on the following derivation, that it's not so. Right? Without even a special, pasuk, we can just draw that conclusion. Why? Nasi mutza b'chal yachad. Let's shift over to the Nasi for a second. The king. He has his own system. Very different than a regular person. He brings his own type of carbon. Right? If an ordinary person is Mechal Shabbos, b'shegig, he brings a kivsa osira, right? A Nasi brings a sair all along, all throughout. Any avera that has, a karis potential, if done b'shegig, he brings a sair. So he's different. And likewise, the Mashiach is different than your average, Joe. Mashiach mutza b'chal yachad. He brings a par, his own type of carbon. So let's compare the Mashiach to the Nasi. Ma Nasi chata b'fnei atzmai, maybe b'fnei atzmai. Just by the Nasi. If he committed his own personal sin, he did it alone. He brings his own carbon. But chata matzibur. But if his sin was in conjunction with everybody else, resulting from the the psak of the Bezdin, then of course he's covered by their carbon as well. Maybe mischapali matzibur. The same should apply to the Mashiach. Af Mashiach chata b'fnei atzmei. Although when he commits his own personal sin, meaning due to his own personal ruling and error, certainly he carries his own personal liability. Maybe b'fnei atzmei, but in a case where he's chata matzibur with them, certainly he should be covered with the same carbon. Mischapali matzibur. That'll be our first, suggestion. Law, says the Gemara, it's not so simple. Perhaps you can't learn a Mashiach from a Nasi. Just because it applies to a Nasi, that's because we find that in Kippur, the Melech is absorbed into the carbon of the tzibur. He has no special carbon on Yom Kippur. So, they're closely knit, the Nasi with the tzibur. That explains why, when he sins with the tzibur, he's incorporated into their carbon, as opposed to Talmud Bavli, supposed to Kohen Gadol, who on Yom Kippur requires his own carbon, right? So perhaps, because of that, since Yom Kippur, he needs his own. Perhaps, even on ordinary day, when he committed this, major sin, it so happens that at the same time everybody else was committing it as well. Perhaps that doesn't help him. He needs to bring his own part. Comes the pasuk and says, he need only bring his own part when he sinned, only on his own. Okay, it's meaning he sinned on his own. Maybe brings his own part. However, if he sinned together with the tzibur, who was sinning based on the verdict issued by the bezdin, in this case, he can be covered by the same carbon. Ask the Gemara, just one more point of clarification. Hey Chidami, what happened here? Let's assume the Kohen Gadol is a mufla, a man of supreme, scholarship. He's on a level to issue rulings on very, serious items. And the bezdin doesn't have that authority. The chief justice is not there. He doesn't have they don't have the same level. Certainly in this case, he needs to bring his own kapara. You know why? Because the ruling issued by this incompetent bezdin has no validity. In which case there's no power for the public. Which only happens when the recognized authority, who has the ability to issued a wrong ruling. But in the case where they had no business doing so, so there's no unifying factor. It's not considered a public event. Rather, each member of the public who sinned is to bring his own personal kispa asira, like your standard korban chatas that a person would bring if he sins. Every single individual. On the other hand, if we say that the bezdin were mufla, had the ability to issue these rulings, ulav mufla, but he's not a man of competence. So why would he bring his own carbon, his own power? We just established the power only comes when there's a formal ruling that he issued on his own behalf. In this case, it has no validity. His judgment, his ruling has no validity. Rapapa, the answer is going to show you mufla and shnein. Both were considered mufla. He was able to rule, and so were they. So in this case, again, if they both related to the same Isra, so it was a simultaneous, transgression on his account, on their account. He's covered by the same carbon. Otherwise, it's two separate Isurim. He needs to bring his own carbon. So Abaye figured like this. When the Mishnah says if he committed his own sin, he needs his own carbon. How did that happen? That he's sitting in one location, the bezdin in a different location, and they both permitted different type of Isurim. So it needs to be different Isurim in different locations. Only then is it considered a separate violation. Rava responds to Abaye. How could location influence this halacha? Just because they're in two different places, they're going to be the trigger points for the separate liabilities. Ella, rather, it's unrelated to location. Even if they're both in the same exact place. But since they're speaking about different items, since they're ruling on two separate items, B'trei Yisur and Tur Yisurim, they're considered on separate tracks and have separate liabilities. He's considered to have sinned on his own. Again, how do we define separate, the separation factor here? Pshita. So in the following case, it's pretty obvious what will be. He permitted fat, and the bezdin permitted a certain aspect of idol worship. Certainly, they're considered separate items. You know why? Because they're so different and so separate. These two Isurim have different, reasons, different sources, different psukim. And they would theoretically trigger different karbonis. The hu par, because him, on account of the chaylev that he ate, would bring a par. Vehein, and the public, on account of the avodazara that they committed, the par v'sor, they have to bring a par v'sor. Right? The hokamai sihani sor, in which case they're bringing a sor in addition to the par. V'ulei maisi, whereas he doesn't need that. So certainly it's a separate track. Koshken is certainly, if it's the other way around. He permitted avodazara, vehein b'chaylev, they permitted fat. The chalukim covered in same legarmi. They're totally different in terms of the karbonos that they bring. Why? The seira, because the Mashiach, if he sins in avodah zarah, brings a seira. Par, and the public who sinned with chaylev brings a par. There's no question. The gap is too wide. Ella, rather, what happens? Hu b'chaylev amachasas hakereb. He permitted a certain type of fat which covers the stomach of the animal, which is forbidden, but he permitted it. Vehein b'chaylev shal hadak, and they permitted a different type of forbidden fat, the fat that runs around the intestines. Mao. How would you treat this? Double violation. Shall we say that they're separate, they're different? Avagav the karban and shav, although in both cases, theoretically, the par would be brought. He would bring his par and they would bring a par, so there's some sort of common denominator. But since these two types of fats are derived from different psukim in the Torah, so that sets them apart. They're based on separate reasons, separate psukim, so you can't connect them. Or you can say, the fact is, they're both fat. They're close enough. Shem chaylev echadu. The fact is, the term chaylev applies to both. It's both the same type of thing. If you'll accept this suggestion that in fact it's one topic, shem chaylev echadu, what happens if hu b'chaylev, he permitted fat, v'heim b'dam, they permitted blood? What would you say? Mi shall we say, but tamayu ha pliginan. The fact is, they're based on different psukim. You can't connect them. A pligin. What you can say, kivin the shavin b'karban, since theoretically, they both bring the same carbon. He brings a par, and they bring a par. We focus on the carbon, and they could both be covered by the same carbon. Take it, would leave it unresolved. And the Mishnah continued that in many ways, the Mashiach and the Bezdin follow the same model. Shein Bezdin chayoven, asher mikzas levat, asher levatal mikzas l'kai mikzas. The Bezdin will only bring the par if they negated a part of the Isser, but not its entirety. How do we know this is true? We had this the other day. How do we know that it only works if it's a partial negation? As we said in the previous parak. Davar, the pasuk says, Davar means only part, but not the entire concept. The same idea applies to Mashiach. So how do we know that he too has to follow the same model of only partial negation? We have the pasuk that connects the Mashiach to the public. La'ashmas ha'am, right? Her Mashiach, which teaches that the Mashiach follows the same pattern kitzibur. And likewise, but by avodah zarah, so should the Bezdin permit certain aspects of idol worship, they are chayav. But again, only if it was a partial cancellation, as opposed to a full cancellation. How do we know this is true? The Tanur Rabbanan, we have the Brisa, which again we discussed the other day. Lefi sheyatzav etzkechavim lidan ba'atzma. We find that avodah zarah runs its own track to a certain extent because it has its own a type of carbon, right? Right. The public who sins with avodah zarah brings a par and a sar, as opposed to just a par elsewhere. So perhaps it has its own rules. Perhaps the chiyuv is triggered even if they negate the entire mitzvah of avodah zarah. Nemar, the answer is nemar kan me'ene. We have the word me'ene stated over here by avodah zarah. V'nemar lahal, we find the word me'ene elsewhere by other mitzvahs, other averos. Malahal, we connect just like over there where it says me'ene ha'eda. Bebezdin, the Bezdin was involved, meaning they issued the ruling to allow it. And that's what triggers the system. Afkanami bebezdin. Likewise, we need the bezdin's involvement by avodah zarah as well. And furthermore, umalahal davar lekalago, just like by other averos, it only applies if there's a partial cancellation as opposed to a full. Afkan, likewise, over here by avodah zarah nami, it follows the same system. Davar only partial lekalago as opposed to full negation. Mission continues. Ein chayovin el al hilim davar mishigas hamas. The public will only bring a par if it took place as a 1-2 step system. There was Helem Dover that preceded the Shigas Hamas, meaning it was due to Bezdin's errant judgment, errant ruling, which precipitated the actual act. Mashiach as well needs both components. Likewise, if the public sinned in Avodah Zarah, and Chayav, the Chayiv is only going to be if both components are there, right? The ruling with the act. Ela Helem Dover, Mashiach Hamas. Says the more Minol, how do we know that by Avodah Zarah as well, it is preceded with Helem Dover? Tan Rabbanon, Yishku, this is the pasuk of Avodah Zarah, they sinned. Yochel Yuchayvan, perhaps they would be obliged to bring a korban al shigas masa by simply doing Avodah Zarah without it being advanced by the Helem Dover. Tamalaymar Yishku v'nelam Dover. This is actually the pasuk by regular Avera. Right, sorry, by regular Avera. And Vayikra Dalet. An Avera, a serious Avera that carries chorus, but not Avodah Zarah yet. We're going to get to that in a minute. So again, Manal, how do we know that by ordinary Averas? The par, on account of the public's transgression, only happens if it's preceded by Helem Davar. Tan Rabbanon, we have the pasuk, which says, Yishku, they sinned. Yochel Yuchayavan, perhaps they would bring their korban, their par, simply al shigas mas, for doing something wrong. Tamalami Yishku v'nelam davar. We learn from here, in Chayavan, they're only bringing their korban if it is advanced by a Helem Davar. Ela Helem Davar, there was that intellectual confusion that preceded the actual act, im shigas mas. And Mashiach as well needs both components, first his ruling and then his act. Connecting him to the public, Har Mashiach Katzibur, he follows the same model as the Tzibur. Now the Mishnah ends off with a reference to Avodah Zarah as well. In terms of the public liability by Avodah Zarah, it's conditioned upon both components being present. Ela al Helem Davar, followed with Imshigas Hamas. Minol, how do we know this applies to Avodah Zarah as well? Tan Rabbanon, we have the Brisa, which we actually quoted a couple of seconds ago. We find that Avodah Zarah has its own track, its own type of korban, different than other Averos. Perhaps it would trigger liability on account of the public who sinned by simply sinning. Al Shigas Hamas, simply due to the act. The answer is Nemar Kan Me'ene. We have the word Me'ene by Avodah Zarah. For Nemar Lahal, we have elsewhere by other Averos Me'ene. And over there it says Me'ene HaKol, right? V'nelam Davar. Ma Lahal and Chayav, just like by other Averos, the Chiv is only if there is Helem Davar. There was intellectual confusion as well on account of the Bezdin. Ein Chayavin El Helem Davar, which is then accompanied by Im Shigas Mas. Afkan, likewise over here by Avodah Zarah, both components are needed. Ein Chayavin El Helem Davar Im Shigas Mas. Okay. So regarding the public, it's been established. Helem Davar Im Shigas Hamasa only. What about the Mashiach? What about the Kohen Gadol? So in terms of other Averis, the Mishnah began that the public needs Helem Davar, V'chein Mashiach. But if you take a close look at the second part of the Mishnah, the public by Avodah Zarah requires Helem Davar. There's no ending of V'chein Mashiach. The Mishnah does not make a reference again to Mashiach with relation to the Helem Davar requirement by Avodah Zarah. So it's required by the public. What about by the Mashiach? It would sound from the Mishnah, Avodah Zarah is different regarding a Mashiach. The sinful act alone is sufficient to trigger his korban, his se'ira. He doesn't need Helem Davar. Says the Gemara, Masnisin Mani Rebbe. We don't find the Mishnah comparing Mashiach to the public to require him Helem Davar, Avodah Zarah. Like Tony, there's no mention of that, Masnisin. So our Mishnah can be going only like Rebbe, who says that by Mashiach, sinning by Avodah Zarah is enough without Helem Davar. Mani Rebbe, the son of a Bryce. Mashiach is Gechav. What about a Mashiach by Avodah Zarah? Does it require 2 steps? Or just the act itself? Rebbe Eimer, just the act, Mashigas Mas? That corresponds to our Mishnah. However, Chacham Eimer, they disagree. It's just like any other Avera, Helem Davar. It needs to be preceded by helam davar. Okay. Now, Vishavin, all agree, Shabbos-ira. What carbon does he bring, regardless of what's required to bring the carbon? What actual carbon does he bring? A she-goat, like anybody else who would do avodah zarah. And likewise, Vishavin, all are in agreement, She'em Yavesh Tali, if a situation should arise where there's an element of doubt, whether he ate the chaylev or whatever, he doesn't bring this doubtful asham, doesn't apply to a Mashiach. Okay. So we're going to focus on the first part of this price. A Mashiach who sinned with avodah zarah, according to Rebbe, the act itself is sufficient to trigger this era. Chacham say helam davar is required as well. And the Mishnah, which omitted any mention of Mashiach at the last part of the Mishnah, seems to indicate, like Rebbe, says the Gemara, V'tisper, how can you suggest as such? If you take a look at the next daf, the next Mishnah, where the Mishnah states another condition, the par, helam davar shel tzibur, or the par of the Kohen Mashiach, is specific to a violation of very, very super serious isser, something which carries a kares penalty if done intentionally. Only then is there, this carbon brought if done unintentionally. All right, so the Mishnah says, well, just like by the tzibur, it needs to be kares chatas, equation. V'chein Mashiach, same with the Mashiach. And then the Mishnah continues. Same regarding avodah zarah. The tzibur only brings their carbon if we have that kares chatas flip. And the Mishnah, once again, omits any reference back to Mashiach at the very last part of that Mishnah. But the very fact is that it does apply to the Mashiach as well. He's only chayiv his par if he committed something which has the potential for kares. We learned from the Pesukim, we know it for a fact. As we're going to see later. So, the omission in the Mishnah, at least in that case, was not intended to differentiate between the Mashiach and the public. The Mishnah doesn't, have to, review things over and over again. So once we have one reference to Mashiach being like the tzibur, in terms of her first part of the Mishnah, on Daf Ches Amud Aleph, so it's self-understood that it applies to the second part too. There's no need to, review it again. But it is, bro. So how can you say that an omission indicates a separation? Bizdonei kares, ubishgasei chatas. In the next Mishnah, where we learn that these only apply to super serious averos that have kares chatas. Miktani, does the Mishnah then at the end review again and make another reference to Mashiach? After having already done in the beginning of the Mishnah, on Daf Ches Amud Aleph? Ella, rather the correct understanding is, Taniha, once the Mishnah made reference to Mashiach in the beginning of the Mishnah, what in law? Same applies to the second part. There's no need to, review it over and over. Hachanami, same can be said about our Mishnah. Once the Mishnah already made reference to Mashiach at the beginning of the Mishnah, there's no need to review it at the end again. It's self-understood that they're on the same boat, they follow the same pattern. Hachanami, here as well, Tana Havod in Laha. Once we have the connection in the beginning of the Mishnah, same would apply to the second part of the Mishnah. I.e., that by avodah zarah as well, Mashiach is only chayiv if there's helam davar, just like by the tzibur. So in any case, we're not entirely sure, which position the Mishnah adopts. We're assuming that it could go even like Rabbanon. Helam davar is required. Okay, in any case, let's zero in on this machlekes between Rebbe, who says that in terms of avodah zarah, Mashiach brings a carbon even by just sinning without preceding it with a helam davar. Rabbanon require helam davar as well. My time in the Rebbe. What's Rebbe's source? This is the pasuk by in Parsha Shlach by avodah zarah. And the Kohen brings the carbon on the soul that was shegeges bechet o bishkaga. The sin was defined as the act. The act alone is sufficient to be considered and to trigger the carbon. What are these terms referring to? Hanefesh and Shegegas, says Rebbe, Hanefesh is going on the Mashiach, the Mashiach who sinned with Avodah Zarah. Hashegegas and us is going on the king. And the pasuk continues, Becheta b'shgaga. Rebbe says like this. Rebbe Savar Chet ze b'shgaga yehi. That this sin is defined by the shgag, by the act alone, without need for any more components. But Rabbanan Savar, Rabbanan disagree. It's the opposite. Misha Chetoi b'shgaga. When do we say that the carbon is required simply by sinning, simply for sinning, without helam davar? So the opposite only applies to that type of person who typically brings his carbon. By a person who typically his sin is defined by the mere act, without any need for any further, any more additional components of helam davar, meaning a regular person, a nasi. So again, in these cases, the act itself triggers the carbon, as opposed to the Mashiach, who typically requires more. Everyone agrees that by other Averos, aside from Avodah Zarah, everyone agrees he needs helam davar. It's just the opposite. He's not included in this system. Yotze Mashiach, as opposed to Mashiach, Sheichat b'shgag, his chet is not limited to the act itself. Ella, rather, he needs more than that, helam davar. He requires helam davar as well. So likewise, Avodah Zarah, he needs that as well. Bottom line is v'shavan shebesiro ki yachid. Whatever it takes to get him to that obligation. According to Rebbe, just the act. According to Rabban, the helam davar as well. But what type of carbon? He brings a seira like anybody else would bring. How do we know this is true? Damakra, nefesh achas. So again, there's the puzzle of the Zara, using a very generic term, nefesh, which can cover anybody. And that covers everybody. For the seira, echad yachad, whether an ordinary person, echad nasi, echad mashiach, all these individuals, kulam b'chal nefesh achas, saying they're covered by this term nefesh, and therefore they bring a seira. Okay, let's do a quick review of today's daf. We correlate the Mashiach to the Tzibur to the extent that, just like by Tzibur, it needs to be helam davar im shigas masa. The helam davar relates to a partial negation as opposed to a full negation of the avera. Likewise, the Mashiach has to run the same pattern. And he also brings a par. If he ruled to allow himself something, unless we say it was done at the same time, simultaneous with the Bezdin, who ruled on the same, Isser, in which case he's covered by their carbon, otherwise he brings his own carbon. And these concepts apply to Avodah Zarah as well. Just the carbon changes a bit. So if the tzibur was misled by the Bezdin, they bring a par and a soyer. Whereas the Kohen Mashiach, we sinned with Avodah Zarah, it brings a seira like anybody else. And according to Rabbanon, in this case as well, he needs to have the helam davar. And Rabbi disagrees. All the best to you and atzlach.